Hey, it's Liz from Book Learning. Welcome back. Today I'm going to review Blind Man's Garden by Nadeem Aslam. It was written in 2013, and I picked it up randomly at my library from a display set of books that were related to Adoption and Foster Awareness Month. So I came into this book having very little concept of what it would be about. And it turns out the story of a family of Pakistani rural villagers in the aftermath of 9/11. So fitting for Memorial Day, which is a day in America where we are supposed to reflect and remember on the people who have given their lives for conflict, in times of conflict. This is the Muslim perspective. And across the entire narrative, I felt like one of the main themes was that war is stupid. And I have to agree. This particular story is, we have the central father figure, Rohan, who is the title character. He goes blind over the course of the novel. And as his blindness increases in natural and unnatural ways, the narrative relies on the other people in his life to tell this story of how they respond and how they are affected by the conflict in Afghanistan. So as Muslims, they are somehow called to protect their Muslim brothers in Afghanistan, pitting them against American forces. But at the same time, across the course of the book, we find that there's factionalism. For example, Rohan's school that he had established with his late wife has become taken over by extremists who essentially use it to funnel students to jihadist training camps, which is not what Rohan wants to have happen. One of the things that Aslam does in terms of writing this story is nothing ever really comes into focus exactly, which reflects the confusion of war, and in particular the confusion of this war. So he writes in incomplete sentences frequently. He leaves questions to linger. And in terms of the narrative, characters are not omniscient. They cannot know what is happening to the other characters that they are concerned about. And for example, Rohan goes to Peshawar to try to find his adopted sons, who were supposed to go to Peshawar but instead decided to go to war. But Rohan doesn't know that. And then that's kind of the essential point at which all knowledge is lost. But at the same time, as we explore various impacts of this conflict, the main theme that I found in this book is that love persists. War is twisted and confusing and unfair in a lot of ways, both emotionally and physically, in terms of capture and like physical violence and the like. But really what it just does is gets in the way of people doing good. I don't want to give away too much. It's very lyrical and haunting, and I just think you should read it in one go. So love persists, and it's not just a romantic love, although there are romantic lines drawn between various characters. It's essentially just a filial love, like family and community, loving each other and supporting each other. So we have this figure of Rohan, who is blind, and he gets more blind across the course of the book, so that he literally has to rely on other people to tell his story, to support him, and they pull together. And even as as his adopted sons go into the conflict and come across these other people, and as Rohan tries to find them, they rely on other people, and they find other people who want to do good, who are just afraid of what doing good might mean within this conflict setting. Aside from that aspect, those thematic elements, one of the things that I particularly liked about this book is that it held my hand a little bit in terms of the historical and cultural aspects. So it gave you a sense of references to the conflicts that have influenced the development of the current culture in Pakistan, Afghanistan, etc. And it references British occupations, as well as earlier warring, like with Genghis Khan. So you get a sense of, as the New Yorker reviewer Elizabeth Minkle writes, invasion is an unchanging fact etched into the landscape. Centuries of conflict echo across the narrative. There's another reviewer writing for The Guardian who finds this kind of cultural support to be very distracting and irrational, and ultimately a failure of magical realism. But I disagree, because I don't see... I'm thinking of who is the audience for this book. The audience would be somebody like me who doesn't have a strong sense of that history. It's a novel. It's not an historical novel, but it does need to give you enough to understand what the author is trying to convey. But again, I've also not read the author's previous work, The Wasted Vigil, which is the book against which that negative Guardian reviewer is holding The Blind Man's Garden. Essentially, his main argument is The Blind Man's Garden isn't The Wasted Vigil. Whatever. So just to briefly wrap this up, I have 3 recommendations for companion books for The Blind Man's Garden that I've read that gave me a little bit of insight as I was reading this particular novel. So the first two rather, help situate Aslam's experience or imagination with other modern experiences, with the modern conflict. And the first one is I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai with Christina Lamb, which tells the story of a very, very powerful young woman who responded to her own terrorist attack, an attack against her person, by continuing to speak out about the importance of education. And Alif the Unseen by G. Willow Wilson, which is another fictional tale related to this conflict setting. Alif the Unseen is a magical tale of internet resistance, and how that places the main character and those he knows in harm's way. So it gives us yet another perspective of the fact that the extremists are not necessarily telling the whole story, or they're not speaking on behalf of all of the Muslim world. And then the third book echoes the sense of how conflict has informed the development of this region, and that is Leo Tolstoy's Hadji Murad, which was written at the turn of the 20th century, and it's set in a different part of that Middle Eastern continental area, and tells about Chechen Muslims who are literally caught between conflict of Christian versus Muslim and one power versus another, and it just reinforces the sense that this is the life that region has, or that large region has known for quite a long time, unfortunately. Yeah, so I really love this book. I hope you give it a shot. I hope you have a good Memorial Day, and